Oh, that's a good idea. This is my social distance moderator. This is Greg Hansen. Say hi, Greg.
Oh, you don't need to see my face.
Well, he's there and he will be reading questions or topic requests or anything that you want to talk about. Um, so if you have questions as go, you can put them in the live chat area, and the moderator will let me know as we go. Okay. So I would like to know how you people are doing. So after you make your coffee and walk your dog, let me know. Until I'll go first. I'll tell you how I'll go first while you're doing that. Do you have any questions? You guys? Moderator?
No questions. Alex asks, Ali K-Bob wants to know what's your favorite way to de-stress right now?
My favorite way to de stress. That depends on two things. That depends on my mood, and that depends on whether I have been with people virtually or not been with people. So to de stress, if I've been with people virtually, I go not with people. To haven't been with people, I tend to go find people. And that plays into a little bit of what we're going to talk about later about how anxiety, introvertism, and extrovertism plays into this whole COVID thing and the COVID anxiety that goes along with it. And it's very different for a lot of people. And I'm finding out that people are sort of feeling bad when they think they're having the wrong kind of anxiety because the rest of the world seems to be having something different. So we're going to talk about that. That's a good question, Allie K. Bob. It sounds a little boring, and like I'm not saying this to be healthy, it's actually true. My favorite way to de stress is to put on my noise canceling earphones, put on a podcast, and go for a walk. And I just walk until I feel better. And when I feel better, I turn around and come back. That's probably my favorite way. Um, I can do that if I'm regular energy, medium energy, maybe not so much if I'm low energy. For low energy, I tend to throw my yoga mat on the floor, lay down, and stretch. Or maybe have a drink and watch One Punch Man or something like light and something like that. Yeah, for the most part. I do like online game nights with people, but not if there's sound involved. I find that extremely stressful. Not de stressing, that's very stressful. So, someone needs to figure out how to make these games less chaotic and noisy for those of us who like don't like super loud things all the time. But other than that, it's really, really fun. Okay. So, this is all about COVID and what COVID's doing to everybody, but I wanted to talk a little bit about just what anxiety is because I think it applies to this situation, but it also just kind of applies in general. And I was thinking, I've got like four parts. The first concept about anxiety, it's something that it's what we feel when we're not being present. And most of us are not present like 80% of the day because we're just thinking about the next meeting or the next deadline or the thing we want to do tomorrow. If you really don't like what you're doing right now, you'll on purpose not be present. You might, for example, like plan fake vacations to places to make yourself feel a little bit better. I'm not saying this is healthy or not healthy. I'm just saying in general, when we don't really love what's going on, we try to be somewhere else. Um, but that actually doesn't feel great. When we're spending tons of time in the past, that's usually like regret or like rethinking things that we did or choices that we made. And that tends to end up as depression. When we are thinking about how bad COVID's going to get and how many people are going to lose their jobs and then what's going to happen because of that and then my house and then can I afford to feed my dog, and we're living in the future, yes, it's reasonable-ish. This is actually happening. It's a real thing. So our brains say, well, this is an actual problem, so therefore my thoughts are valid. But really, it's a little much. And we're living way far in the future. That's anxiety. Um, Easy fixes for that. Just check in occasionally with the time zone that you're actually in. I like to think of it as like every once in a while, let your mind and your body be in the same room at the same time. And if you can do that once or twice a day, especially if it's intentional, you tend to feel a lot better. Okay, another part to anxiety. Anxiety is sort of like a byproduct or a leftover for what when we are trying not to feel what we're actually feeling. This works really, we have different ways of doing that, and they all work really well, so well that we don't usually consciously know we're doing them. Have you ever been sitting around and you already had dinner and you're not hungry, but you just get up and start seeing what you have in the cupboards for no reason? That's probably a little bit of that happening. But it works so well, we don't even know that it's happening. What'd you say, moderator?
I said I've never heard of people doing that.
Never. No, not that I've ever done that myself, of course. But like,
get up and open the cupboards.
Yeah. I mean, I've never gotten up and just looked in the refrigerator for 5 times in a row for no reason. But like, I hear that people do it. And part of what that is there's just something in us that just doesn't, we just don't feel quite okay. We're just looking to be a little more comfortable, a little less something, a little more something. But we're not present. If we were present, there's a better chance we'd know what was going on. That sounds easy, but it's actually not, because most of us have a lifetime of just disconnecting from unpleasant feelings. And this can start early because, no parent wants to hear their kids have a negative thing. So like, it's really easy just to, a kid is crying, and from our adult thing, it's like no world. So it's like no actual real world problem. So we don't want to hear it. So we wanted them to shut it down. So we teach them to shut it down. And it gets so good, like we don't even know we're doing it. People use food. People use television. People use like adrenaline type activities. People use gaming, sex, gambling, work. A lot of people use work. And I think they don't really know they're doing it because they think they're just being an adult and just like being responsible and working. But when it gets out of balance, that turns into something that blocks you from actually knowing how you're doing. When things get too fast and too busy and too forward focused, we really don't know how we feel. And it kind of takes practice to get into the habit of feeling that again. And if you heard the term, if you have been living under a rock and you haven't heard the term mindfulness, that's what that's all about. Just trying to be a little bit more aware. Problem with that is it takes a whole lot of energy to try to not feel what you're actually feeling. It's exhausting. It's kind of irritating. It also becomes automatic, so it's a hard habit to break. That said, we're not, when we're talking about knowing how you feel, we're not talking about moping. We're not talking about like imagining worst case scenario all day long of what's going to happen. What if I get this? What if I get COVID? What if my partner gets it? What if my mother, my father, my child? I'm not talking about that. That's different. I'm talking about just being able to look at and objectively notice controlling what is in our control, because there's always something. When we feel trapped and we don't feel like we have options, a lot of times that's when panic sets in and you can't think straight. You can't problem solve. Like nothing really works that well. So recognizing the small things that we have in our control is important. Now, here's the part where I'm talking about we're not moping and we're not living in the feelings. We're just noticing them neutrally, because the state of anxiety, this is not very popular with all my therapist friends, but it's partially a choice. We we do get to decide what sort of mindset or what sort of approach we're going to take to handling a situation. We don't decide our emotions. You don't want to. When you're trying to decide what you feel, that causes anxiety. When something's happening and I'm not liking it, but I don't want to make anybody upset, or I don't want to get yelled at for this or that, and or maybe I feel like guilty for having my actual feelings, then I decide how I feel. I think about the situation and decide cognitively, this is an appropriate response. So I'll decide. When you're doing this, deciding how you feel, that leads to anxiety. But you do get to decide how you're going to deal with it. We want to acknowledge it, be honest about observing and acknowledging those emotions, and then decide what your approach is going to be. Like, actually realize that you have that choice. Probably everybody has at least one friend who thinks that everything is always terrible and everything horrible is going to happen. And it doesn't matter what news you tell them, you can bet on the fact that they're going to somehow find a way to make it less good than it is. That's a person who's decided what kind of mindset they're going to have, but it's not a positive one, and it's not a helpful one. Yes, it can be useful to like imagine worst case scenarios so we can be ready. It's a survival instinct. It's not bad, but when it's out of balance, that feels like anxiety. That's anxiety. I don't know why you would want to voluntarily forfeit the small amounts of things that are in our control. So to me, that's a very important piece, but it doesn't work if you don't do the first three parts of it. Okay, so if we think those things, humor me for a second, and let's say maybe this woman is correct. If that's correct, then what is our plan for dealing with anxiety? The idiot-proof version is be present, feel your feelings, don't avoid them. If you think there's a monster under the bed, look under the bed. It's basically that principle. Once you do that, you can usually slow your mind down enough to start to notice what's in your control and what's not in your control. When we get ramped up in anxiety, the part of our brain that is good at problem solving, it gets, if you could see it, it'd be just this red hot spot right here in the front. And we don't make good decisions. We actually usually don't make decisions in that place. We just have instincts and reactions, not decisions. And also, you stop being able to get to both sides of your brain when you're in a state of anxiety. You feel stuck. You start going over the same thing over and over and over again, and that's because it concentrates itself in this one portion of the brain, and you can't get to all the lobes and all the areas that help you be creative and figure out perspective and all of these things that help get us out of shitty situations. So feel your feelings, don't avoid them. Once you do that, it calms that hot spot down enough so that you can actually look and see, like, okay, is any of this in my control? And what is not in my control? Because when we keep trying to control things that are not in our control, like other people's behavior about staying at home, perhaps. Can I control that? Maybe. If it's my kid or maybe a neighbor who's afraid of me or something like this, maybe. But other people's actions are really not in our control. So you really want to think hard about that and think, what can do? Do you want to communicate? Do you want to vocalize it? Do you want to somehow try to enforce something? Think about what you want to do and then do that. And then the rest that you decide is not in your control, swallow it. It's just right there. It's there anyways. We might as well just accept it instead of trying to fight it, because trying to fight things also causes anxiety and makes us tired. And then lastly, once we've decided what's in our control, what are we going to do? We make our choices about what we're going to do, and then make your peace about the rest that you can't. Lastly, you get to decide what kind of approach, what kind of attitude am I going to have about this? How am I going to be? And you do have a choice. One of the therapy offices that I worked in once, there was this receptionist who I've never seen her yell at anyone. I've never seen her had a bad day. She also was not fake and sugary. She she was a rock. The worst people could come in and yell at her and say things were her fault. The most extreme thing I ever saw her do was one time while someone was actually yelling at her, in her face. She stood up and very quietly said, "Excuse me," and she just left. She just walked out of the building. And that's the most reactive I've ever seen her. And I asked her one day, I said, "We've got all these therapists, we've got all these doctors here." I was like, "You seem to be the most together person." I was like, "Why? Why is it impossible to piss you off? Why are you always, why do you have a good day every day?" And she said, "Because I decide. I wake up and I decide I'm going to have a good day. I'm not going to let anybody ruin my day. Are things going to happen that I don't like? Yes, but I'm not going to let it ruin my day." Um, I would say that sounds like BS, except for I watched her do it for 4 years. So she's got something, she might be onto something there. All right. Moderator, does anybody have any questions? Is the moderator awake? Okay, no. Lastly, the thing I wanted to talk about is this idea that everyone is kind of, there's a very vocal percentage of the population that is talking about how hard it is to be alone and how hard it is to not. Hello? Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay. Should I? Okay. So I want to talk about this idea that how there's so many people on social media talking about how hard it is to be alone and we have to stick together and reach out and talk to someone and Zoom, 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 Zoom. That does not work for everyone. There's a smaller portion of the population that is feeling better than they normally do. Maybe it's just because the commute is out, but in a lot of cases, it's because those people are probably a little more introverted. That does not mean shy. Introverted does have nothing to do with your level of friendliness. Introversion and extroversion only has to do with where do you get your energy. When you go to a party and then you go to another party, and then do you want to go to another party after that? Or after the second party, do you want to go home and just like chill for a day or so? If you get your energy by yourself, that's introvertism. And if you recharge by being around other people, that's extrovertism. It doesn't have anything to do with you're shy or friendly or anything like that. So it can be pretty hard when I'm watching people like cry and be anxious and be like really miss their friends and their family and all of that. But I'm actually feeling good. I am an introvert. I'm a talkative introvert, but I am an introvert. And I didn't even mention for the first couple of weeks. I didn't tell anybody how I was doing. I just hope they didn't ask because I was doing great, which made me feel guilty because the world is on fire and people are dying and this stuff is going on and some people are losing their jobs and lots of people were really upset about not being able to talk to people and I felt better and that actually caused a lot of stress. I'm pretty secure and don't really give too many fucks about what people think, so it wasn't that bad for me. But for other people who may not be that secure in it, it was a real problem. They felt really guilty, and it made them feel even more cut off from people because they were not having the same experience. And since you're an introvert, you're not with other people, so you didn't really know that there were other people having that. That's come out a little bit more lately. So that's helped a little bit. But we've got two different people experiencing this in two different ways, and both ways are okay. It's no different than somebody has blue eyes and somebody has brown eyes. It's just a fact. It's just the way, like we just feel different in different situations. I kind of liken it to like if I have a plant who needs a lot of sun and it needs to stay fairly dry, and I put it in a closet and I keep it really wet, what do you think is going to happen to that plant? It's going to look like something's wrong with that plant. It's not, it's the environment, but it's going to look like it. And if I have a plant that needs like shade and moisture and I put it on the front porch and I don't water it for 2 weeks, it's going to die. It's just like that. So if you are having feelings, if you're feeling guilty or shameful that you're feeling very sad and alone, or that you're not feeling very sad and alone, just think of it like the plant. We just need what we need. In this situation, some of the factors have been moved around so that some of us have things that we need that we don't normally get when life in pre-COVID life. So there's so many ways this has really changed people and changed the world. At some point, we're gonna probably want to get into dealing with them and talking them a little bit better. But this is one of them that's been causing some stress for people, and I just wanted to talk about it because I hadn't heard too many people talk about it, and also because it happened to me, and we like talking about ourselves. So if you have questions and if there are things that are bothering you about this, if there are things that you think you're the only person experiencing, maybe you are, maybe you're not. Send your questions in. You can send them through message on Facebook. You can email us. However you want to get the questions in. And the